Vayyiqtra el Moshe, and you correctly noted the small Aleph. This is one of the characteristics of the Masoretic text, is the unique letters. That's part of the what makes this collection of manuscripts known as the Masoretic text, is the fact that they have certain traditions that are irregular, that are common among all of these manuscripts. Okay, and one of them is big letters, small letters. There are many ideas as to why do we have the minuscule letters or majuscule letters, big letters, capital letters, small letters, fancy terminology for these small and big letters. Now, I think that it was made in order to stand out. Okay, in this case, many of the commentators talk about the Aleph, the small Aleph, as being part of Moses' humility, saying, "Oh, God accidentally called Moses Vayyiqtra." The root Kofresh Yod has to do with something that happens. Okay, we've talked about it a few weeks ago when we've talked about Amalek. So, like, Moses didn't want to say God intentionally called Moses, and so he kind of wrote the Aleph smaller to say, God, stumbled upon Moses, or called Moses inadvertently. It's not that Moses was that important, and that shows the humility of Moses himself, putting himself in a kind of a not as important position as one would think. So that's the common reference to the Aleph, the small Aleph, in the case of Vayyiqtra el Moshe. That's the rabbinic explanation. To tell you that we actually know historically what was the reason for these big and small letters in a way that would be scholarly sufficient for me to tell you this is the explanation, and I think it makes a lot of sense, I cannot. But this is the traditional explanation, okay? Referring to the humility of Moses. So, Vayyiqtra el Moshe, Vaydaber Adonai elav me'oel moed lemor. So we have obviously the Wayyiqtol, Vayyiqtra, Vaydaber. We have three verbs here that are related to speaking. So to saying, speaking. So it's a good opportunity. We have the root Kofresh and Aleph, which is also the same root as the Quran, guys. Right? The Quran today, if you happen to be Sunni Muslims, you're starting the Eid al-Fitr today. Okay, if you happen to be Shiite Muslim, you might be starting it tomorrow, because very interestingly, guys, Betsy wrote correctly yesterday that we're starting the month of Aviv, and we are on the first day of the biblical calendar today, right? We read about it last week, how this is the beginning of the year, the first month of the year. So Thursday was Rosh Chodesh, was the first day of the month according to the Jewish calendar. In most of the Sunni world, the Eid al-Fitr, which is the first day of the month, because of the sighting of the moon, only starts on Friday. So if you're a Saudi sheikh, you're starting the Eid on Friday. But if you're an Iranian mullah, if you're Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, you're starting your Eid al-Fitr only on Saturday. So you get 3 different days, successive days of starting this month, starting the month of Aviv on Thursday, starting the Eid al-Fitr, the 3 days celebration following the month of Ramadan on Thursday if you're Sunni, generally speaking, and if you're Shiite, starting it on Saturday, based on the sighting of the moon. since Rabbinic Judaism deals with the math of it rather than the sighting of it. So even when the conditions are more difficult for sighting of the moon, we follow the mathematical tradition in the last, let's say, 1500 years roughly, as far as what we care. So Vayyiqtra, we've talked about the root Kof Resh and Aleph. There is a lot to say. Vaydaber, a different book of the Pentateuch, contains this root, the book of Devarim, Dalet Bet and Resh, and Lemor, transitioning to a direct speech. We've talked about that in the past. The word Lemor functions pretty much like a colon mark, you know, that it's going to be followed by a direct speech. Now, verse 2 here. Daber ve'amarta. We have a sequence of instructions given to Moses. The first one is Daber. Daber is in the imperative form. Of which binyan, guys? PL binyan, right? We can see the double stem. We can see the doubling doubling the gesh in the bet and the vowel following the first root letter. So it's a masculine singular PL imperative of the root Dalet Bet and Resh, corresponding with Vaydaber that we had seen before, followed by Ve'amarta. So we have an imperative and we have a Weqatal. This is a very common sequence of instructions, starting with an imperative followed by the Weqatal. It's a very typical sequence of orders in biblical Hebrew, very common. One could refer to Daber ve'amarta as kind of a Hendiadys. Guys, remember the term Hendiadys? Hendiadys. Okay, one word in English. I added these hyphens in order to go back to the Greek meaning of this. 1 through 2. Okay, when you have one idea reflected by 2 words. Okay, very common in many languages. When you want to deliver one concept, and you use 2 words. So here, speak and say, 2 words, really meaning one idea. Okay, and Adam ki yakriv mikem. Okay, we've talked about the different uses of the word ki. Okay, here as a conditional particle. Remember that we've talked about in the weekly portion of Mishpatim. Ki tikne eved ivri, ki yakriv mikem. If a person. So ki is used for various purposes. One of them is this if idea, this conditional. Okay, if a person is bringing Korban Ladonai, remember the protasis, the if clause, and the then clause. Min habema, min habakar, min hatzon, takrivu et korbanchem. Min. We have the repetition of the preposition, and you already know this is a regular style of the Hebrew. Repeating a preposition several times, while English would try to avoid it. Okay, so min habehema, min habakar, umin hatzon. This is kind of elaboration of the possibilities to bring a korban. First of all, mikim, okay, to bring from from you, okay? Because many have stressed out how the Qorban should be, the person should think of himself as bringing himself, but bringing the animal as a substitute for himself. Here, we're bringing the Korbanot, and there is a transition, by the way, from the God is speaking on Mount Sinai, right? That's a one-time event. And the tent of meeting, Vaydaber Adonai elav me'oel moed lemor, is kind of a transition from Sinai to the tent of meeting, which contains that invitation to Moses for a relationship with Moses and relationship with the people as a place of meeting, oil moed, right? Place of meeting or tent of meeting. Guys, we've talked about the Eid el-Fitr, right? That starts same root as oil moed, by the way. Yeah, this is, you're shaking your head, but I don't choose the weekly portions. They choose us. I told you the joke about the rabbi and the horse, right? Everything can be tied to the weekly portion. That's how it is. That's how it is. So Oil Moed and Eid al-Fitr. Recently, I started doing a little bit videos in Hebrew, which I happen to speak, but I don't do a lot of videos, and I did the one about the Eid al-Fitr and its connection to biblical Peter Lechem, and the firstborn animal is called Peter Lechem in biblical Hebrew, and how Peter is related to Fitr, and that's opening, the opening of the womb, and the celebration of opening in the sense of opening the Ramadan, the fast of Ramadan. By the way, you might have known that every evening in Ramadan, Muslims who fast, the feast at the end of each day is also called iftar, related to the biblical patur or Peter Lechem. Anyway, so that's Oil Moed, and we've talked about Korban. We'll focus on that word down the road. Next verse is verse 3, and it was important for me to bring it for various purposes. Let's see this verse, guys. Who wants to read, guys? Yes, Ulrike, go ahead.
Im Olag Kor Mano Min Ha-Bakar Zachar Tamim Yakrivenu El Petach Ohel Petach.
Right, you can see where the tam is.
Ohel Moed Yakriv Oto Lirtsono Livnei Adonai. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer it a male without defect. He shall offer it at the doorway of the tent of meeting, that he may be accepted before the Lord.
Right. So again, we have a lot of dealing with the root Kuf Resh and Bet, and we'll talk about it down the road today. Im ola korbano min habakar, zachar tamim yakrivenu, el petach o el moed yakriv oto, lirtzono lifnei Adonai. And you can see the root Kuf Resh and Bet. We'll focus on that root down the road, but I'm showing it, and we might even go back to this verse when we deal with the root. but that's a bit about how central this is. Few grammatical or syntactical points that we have made in the last few weeks, and it's worth repeating. So im ola korbano min habakar. So we have im. We had before earlier today. We had ki as conditional particle. Now we have im. You remember we've talked about it again in the weekly portion of Mishpatim. We've talked about the general case presented by ki and then specific cases by im. This is not very different. Okay, so the protasis here, the if clause starts with im, followed by a verbless clause, a nominal sentence. Ola korbano min habakar. We don't have a verb here. We have a verb here, yakrivenu, and we have yakriv, a verb here, but ola korbano min habakar is a nominal sentence. Okay, there is no verb here, and there is even no copula. There is no im ola hu korbano min habakar. There is no copula in this sentence, and no verb. It's implied. If his offering is a burnt offering, this is implied. This is not in the Hebrew, okay? Because Hebrew does not require this to be verb. Then we have the apodosis, the then clause, Zachar tamim yakrivenu. He should sacrifice the sacrifice as a Zachar tamim, as a male without any defect. Tamim, complete. Okay. By the way, the religious movement of Chabad made it to the headlines, though Tucker Carlson was busy interviewing Joe Kent a day after he went defected from the government. I don't know why I'm doing it to myself, but I listen. I wash the dishes. I do whatever it is. I listen. I don't know why, but I prefer listening to people I disagree with. And I don't know, guys. If you want to have a good laugh, go find Ami Kozak. Ami Kozak is doing impressions, like great impressions of the president and others, and of Tucker Carlson. You laugh your lungs out. Really, go find Ami Kozak. Funny, crazy funny. Anyway, Tamim. Why am I mentioning both of them in the context of Tamim? Because Chabad are calling young men in their academies, if you're not married, they call you Tamim. Okay, that's the terminology of Chabad to talk about young men that are in yeshiva, in academy, but are not married yet. So they are young, naive, complete, all dedicated to studying. Okay, so Tamim is, or Tomim, okay, and their yeshivas, their academies, are known as Tomchei Temimim, the supporters of the Temimim, of the ones that are without defect, without blemish. So that's the Tamim. Okay, just so you see that I'm not just telling you stuff. Here is the Chabad dictionary, so you see that Tamim is, just a moment, wordsmith, Tamim. Do you see this now, guys? Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
So, Tamim Yeah. That's the terminology of Chabad to refer to young men who are studying in their institutions. Okay, literally whole, pure, innocent. Contextually, you see there is it's not a picture of a young heifer or a young sheep or so. No, yeah. So that's Tamim. Okay, moving on to the next one, and that's the purpose of the offering. Maybe a point to be made before we move on to the next verse. The idea of sacrifice, okay, is to bring you closer to develop your relationship with God. Note that it is not not even leads us to the discussion of the meaning of this, and we'll do it later. It shows the will of the person who gives the offering. Lirtzono lifnei Adonai. It has to come out of one's will. Okay. Yes, Betsy.
Yakrivenu. That suffix, yes.
Third person masculine singular. Yakrivenu. He will sacrifice it. So that's an object suffix. Okay.
An object suffix. Okay. For a third masculine singular?
Yes, we have more than one possibility for third person masculine singular object